everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I'm going to make some sock blanks out of worsted weight yarn, which really makes them blanks because the sock implies sock yarn, but we're going to make some knit blanks to dye and then unravel to create a custom colorway. But first, I need to give a huge shout out and happy birthday to today's lab partner, Dawn. Dawn, thank you so much for being my lab partner today, and a belated happy birthday. Here are the two custom blanks that I made for today's project. I'll show you how I made them in a minute. But first, what are blanks? Sock blanks or otherwise? Blanks are pieces of knit fabric that are knit so that way you can dye them and then unravel them to turn into something else. So for example, with these tubes here, one end of the yarn is at one end, one is at the other. And so you can imagine that if I were to dip dye it and create a gradient of color along the blank, you would end up with gradient yarn. And so it allows you to do something asymmetric like that. Now the reason why I made my own blanks this time is that the yarn we're using today is Wool to Die For's Crazy 8 worsted. This yarn is 100% superwash merino wool, and you can't buy this yarn in blank form. Sock blanks made out of fingering weight yarn are more common, and so those are commercially available so you can buy, dye, and then unravel. But let me go show you how I made this on one of my hand crank knitting machines. To make the blank, the first thing I did was wind the yarn into a yarn cake so that way it would be easier to manage. And then I took out one of my plastic hand crank knitting machines. These really are only good, in my opinion, for making blanks that you plan to unravel in the end, because the gauge, there's just really not enough stitches to make a hat or something for an adult on this machine. And ultimately, because the gears are plastic, it is relatively low quality, but it works really well to make a blank that I plan to unravel. I don't need to care if I have some dropped stitches in the middle, if there are some snags, because I know I'm going to unravel it in the end anyway. And this is a really inexpensive way to make it yourself. I do have some older tutorials and reviews of making blanks on my channel, which you can go check out. Those have some troubleshooting tips as well. But anyway, this is how I made the blank. I didn't knit it by hand. I cranked these while watching a movie. One last note is that I found that these hand crank machines can handle 2 strands of fingering weight yarn at a time, but when it comes to anything DK or thicker, then it can really only handle, but when it comes to DK or worsted weight yarn, it can really only handle 1 strand at a time. So you can't really make a double-stranded blank out of a thicker yarn. And I don't think that these could really handle anything bulky because I think that the yarn would struggle to go through the machine. And here are the 2 blanks that I made. You can see some of the imperfections along the way on this one. I'm sure there are probably some imperfections. This one seems to have fewer errors in it. Ultimately, it could change. Oh, there's, this section right here. Ultimately, these imperfections, if you were trying to do like stripes, maybe that would transfer some more yarn to various places. But ultimately, since you're going to unravel it, you're going to get what you get. And I thought it would be fun to dye something kind of mirrored with them, because my plan is to add some zip tie resists. And I'll probably put these on once the yarn is wet. But my plan is to add some zip tie resists, and I think what I want to do is, will I be able to get this back off easily? There we go. And since my color theme today is going to be green and pink, I thought it would be fun to add the resists the same way on both. Dye one pink, dye one green, and then either with speckles, or we'll see what those resists look like, come back in with the other color and dye that negative space with the other color. And so I think that that'll be really fun, and we'll take advantage of the blank by maybe spacing the resists closer on one side and then further and further out. And so they're gonna kind of mirror each other, but with the colors flipped. So I'm excited about that. And We'll see how the base colors go before we decide what we'll do next. But the first thing I need to do is pre-soak the yarn. I went to go grab the yarn to pre-soak it and I changed my mind. I don't want to pre-soak the yarn while it is wet. I want to pre-soak it while it is dry. So here is what we're going to do. We're going to pick the approximate midpoint and get a zip tie and pull it tight. We're going to do that for both here in the middle. And what this is going to do is, because we've got this area tight right here, it's going to limit the ability of dye to get into that area, giving us an area that is undyed. But to make the resist a little bit bigger, I'm going to add some more zip ties on this little area. And there'll be some like dye that gets in between, but we should get a bit of area that's white. I mean, we'll see what happens, but yeah, we have 3 resists right there. And I'll do the same thing on the other blank and keep adding zip ties down the length. Had I made these blanks on my other knitting machine, I might have knotted the fabric. But since these blanks don't have as much length because the circumference is bigger, if I were to tie a knot, I would probably be able to do 1 or 2 total, and that's it. But I kept adding zip ties along the blanks, and I know these zip ties sometimes deposit a little bit of green, but since we're going for a green and pink theme, I think that that'll be okay. I'm not worried about transfer. But I kept adding zip ties until I was satisfied with the placement. And I try to keep placement similar, but you can see it's not quite the same. So for example, here, I could maybe shift them if I wanted to and move it down a little more, but it's not gonna be identical. And this is why when they make double-stranded sock planks, they do it that way. Because if these were, say they were these were gonna turn into 2 socks and we're gonna dye them with the same color, some of these transitions would happen at different places. There's randomness based on how the blanks are gathered for those resist points. And so that is something to consider when you are dyeing blanks, and that's why sometimes having them double-stranded is good. But my crank knitting machines cannot handle double-stranded, even DK weight yarn. But now I'm going to pre-soak our blanks in some plain water. And the reason why I'm pre-soaking it now before we dye it is that if I add this to the dye when everything in here is dry in the middle, then it might pull in some of the dye before things have a chance to strike to the yarn on the outside, and we want to have the best possible chance of having some resist in there. So I'm gonna let this soak, goodness, I would say a minimum of 30 minutes, but in all likelihood, I'm probably gonna let it pre-soak overnight. Look, you can see some air bubbles coming out. That way we have a better chance that all the yarn is well saturated. I pulled Dharma acid dyes in deep magenta and emerald green to be our main colors. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to start measuring out and dissolving the dyes. And I weighed out a ½ gram of each color and dissolved it in hot tap water, not worrying about the volume because we're gonna kettle dye this yarn anyway. Now I could have gone for more dye, but I figured I'd start a little bit lower than what I thought I might want because we can always add more dye later, but we can't take it away. And also I can always add more dye onto the sections that didn't have the resist once we get to starting to treat the colors at that stage. Now, I intend to use each of these colors as a contrasting color on the opposite blank eventually, but we may pull in some other pinks and greens to work into both blanks. We'll see how we feel once we remove the resists. In this dye pot, I have 16 cups of water. I'm gonna bring over the green dye. We are heating things up. I'm gonna go rinse the rest of the dye out of this. Grab that last little bit. And then as for acid, we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going really slow with that because I didn't want the dye to splash up. This is why you wear safety glasses, everyone. And I could continue to let this heat more, but I actually think I'm gonna go grab our yarn. I squeezed out most of the water, but you can see we're still dripping a little bit. And I'm just gonna plop her in, and I'll come stir in a little bit, but let's go set up the pink. With our pink, we also have 16 cups of water. The pot's just smaller. We're gonna also add 6 tablespoons of white vinegar, and then we'll come over with our 1/2 gram of dye. Rinsing that out, and also leaving some water in our yarn. I'm going to pop it in. Now, of our 2 colors, our pink will strike faster than the green. This is a pink that conceivably we could try glazing yarn with someday, which means it can strike really fast. The green doesn't. And so that's why I was more okay stirring this one first, but actually we have a lot of area here in the dye bath, and so therefore things aren't too compressed from how we put the yarn in. So anyway, we need to let this heat up. I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes, so then we can check in. The dye bath is still heating up, and so it may not reach just below a boil by the time, well, it should by the time the timer goes off, but it may not have been at temp very long, but we will be steam setting our yarn again in the end. So as long as all the color absorbs, I don't care how long it's been heating. And again, 30 minutes isn't like a magical number. It just is one that tends to work for me. And it's only been a couple of minutes that we've been in here with the green. But I'm just gonna wiggle a little bit. And then again, let this sit, let colors absorb, and we'll see where we are when the timer goes off. Okay, after 30 minutes, there's just a tiny bit of green left in here. And I'll show you in a minute, but the pink dye bath has cleared completely. So what I'm gonna do, ooh, I picked that up almost exactly from the middle. Is try to remove, ooh, you can see a resist. That's so good when it works. Okay, but I don't want to fling anything. All right, I'm gonna set this aside to cool, and we'll also set our pink aside to cool. Trying to drain water if we can. That'll make the cooling process go a little bit faster. But I love, love, love how bright the pink is. The pink and green look so good together. It's giving me Wicked vibes, which is making me really happy. And Dawn, I don't know if you plan to use these in the same project or do 2 different projects with it, but I really hope you're gonna love it. Okay, it's time to remove the resists. Maybe our blanks are starting to unravel a little bit. But I thought we'd at least do this area and remove our zip ties, and so you can see where some color gets through. I'm curious if we'll see any green transfer. I'm not expecting any, but we have a spot. Oh, that's really nice. I was a little nervous because tightening the zip ties this much was really tight, especially compared to when I do full skeins of yarn. And so I knew we would have a little bit of resist, but I didn't know how big the areas would be. And here on this side, you can see like some of the spaces left by the resist, and you can see some of that over here as well. It almost looks like little faces. But anyway, I am very, very excited. I'm excited by how big the patch we have is to work with, because I didn't know if it was going to feel diagonal, if it was going to feel symmetric on both sides, just because I wasn't sure how the blanks twisted and pulled or anything. And so seeing what the blanks look like with all the resist remove is going to help me decide what I want to do for the next stage, if I want to do something like speckles, if I want to hand paint the pink and green onto the opposite skein, or what. Either way, I'm very excited. Hey, it worked! The resists get further and further apart. Ah! And so then imagine, and I think I'm gonna go not with speckles, I think I'm gonna mix up green, and there might be some like borders where the colors blend, but imagine you go here, and then you go here, and then it's sort of like transitions from pink to green with like alternate thin stripes of the other color. Oh, this is working so cool. I'm so excited. Now, each of these sections, if we were to unravel it and knit as is, there would be some variegated area in between the white and the green, or the white and the pink. It's not going to be a perfect crisp stripe, and I'm not planning on knitting a swatch out of this. But when I unravel the yarn, we'll be able to look at the progression and talk about that. I am so unbelievably happy. But I actually, even though I have these laid out all nice and neat, I'm gonna need to move them because I need to go and mix up some more dyes. I put my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves back on and measured out approximately 0.2 grams of each of the two colors, and then dissolved it in some water. I didn't measure the volume closely, but I did bring over about 200 milliliters of hot water and split it between the two cups. And so this gives us approximately a 0.2% stock solution, which isn't exact because I wasn't measuring everything precisely, but for reference, I know that if I had these colors mixed at a 1% stock solution concentration, or 1 gram of dye in 100 milliliters, then that color would be more intense than what I want for hand painting this onto our blanks. So yeah, I'm glad that I have like a rough estimate, so that way I know if the color's too light, how to adjust things. Okay, I have the blank laid out on plastic wrap, and I've stretched it a little bit. This should help the dyes go through a section. Now, if I really, really wanted to be able to place the colors and avoid overlap and transfer, then I could use guar gum, but things aren't going to be lined up perfectly anyway. And I can kind of approximate where I want these colors to go, trying to stick in the middle and using a foam brush, dabbing the colors on. The thing I like about using foam brushes for hand painting like this is that it helps remove some liquid, or I don't know if it actually removes some liquid, but it really helps you control the placement of the colors at least a little bit. And so we may have some dark areas at those intersections, but there's a little bit less spread than what we would have if we were doing something else. And so now I'm bringing over just a little bit of vinegar onto these areas because I don't know how much acid was in there from before, and I want the colors to stay put. And we can flip it. Okay, you can see more transfer happening on that other side, but the pink, and by transfer I mean spread, giving us this like dark color, but I'm gonna have to be okay with that, and I can add a little more. The more I add, the more likely it is to blend between the two colors, but again, some kind of dye thickener could help if that's something that you're concerned about, but I'm not, because since we have some of those green dots in the middle anyway, I knew that we'd already get some of that dark color. It'll look like speckles, it'll be fine. That went really quickly, and I have a feeling I mixed up way too much dye. So I just applied the pink onto the rest. Okay, I realized why we're seeing more of the color spread on the bottom of the blank than we are seeing on our top section. as I start to wrap things up. And I think that that reason is because these blanks are so loose, when I press in, some liquid spreads, and that spread is happening towards the bottom. But anyway, I'm now going to roll up our blank. Yeah, you can see maybe more of that dark color on the underside, but the nice thing is since I've already set the green, oh, I didn't add acid. Hopefully this isn't, I won't regret this later. At least we know that this pink color does absorb a little bit easier than the green. But anyway, what I was gonna say is that we know that the green isn't gonna run all the way into the pink because the green is already set. And even though green is a color that will spread more, even once it has been set, I think we can be very confident this time. But anyway, I'm gonna go put this in my steamer basket and we'll set up to dye the other blank. And it looks to me like I used maybe around half the total volume of dye that I had mixed. So not bad. We've got our pink all laid out on some plastic wrap and ready to go. And now I just need to add the green, doing the same kind of quickly painting with a foam brush. I'm using a different brush so I'm not mixing the liquid pink and liquid green, but applying the green, doing my best, at least with the top layer, to stay in the middle of the sections, even though I know spread is gonna happen. Okay, time to wrap this up. Now, I've had some questions recently about if alternatives to plastic wrap for doing this. And the reason why we use the plastic wrap is if I were to just fold this, we would get some more transfer of the green onto the areas that we don't want to have the green. And so this is going to help us, especially if I don't squeeze, attempt to keep those areas separate. But even like silicone baking sheets and things that stick to themselves a little bit, they're not big enough. And let me take this over to my steamer basket. You can see we have those 2 jelly rolls in a steamer basket. There's water at the bottom of the pot that I'm boiling. I'm gonna steam set things for 30 minutes. But plastic wrap can go in the microwave. You can steam set it. If you use like a plastic tablecloth or something, that may not be able to withstand heat, and you don't want anything that'll melt onto your yarn because that could damage it. So anyway, I'm gonna let this heat for 30 minutes so we can set that color. And as for our dye leftovers, there's not a ton of dye left, enough that we could get sort of, maybe it would be deeper than a pastel, but a medium toned color. But I'm gonna do something a little bit silly. It's the middle of January 2025, and everything I've dyed this year, all the little bits left in cups, anything that would be a leave no dye behind, I've added into this bottle. And that's where this dye is going to go to. Now, to be fair, there's not that much pigment in here, and so this is probably going to tip the scales in terms of what color we will end up with in here. Gonna squeeze the dye a little bit out of the sponge. I can tell even just looking in the bottle that shifted things pretty pink. But we probably now will have something for sure that'll break. I know that this green and purple give some really beautiful colors. And who knows what else is in here? A little bit of a lot of things. So I'm going to continue, I guess, until this bottle is full. But you'll probably see it eventually in another video, where I won't remember that there's that much pink and green in here. But I would say we have less than 1/4 gram of dye in this whole bottle. Maybe less than 0.3, but still, not very much. Okay, the 30 minutes are up, and thankfully I see both of the colors I want to see. I am going to remove these, turn off the steamer basket, and now I'm going to wait for them to cool. I could try to unwrap them. Now we are very steamy because I'm on the pot. I could try to unwrap them now, like with the use of the tongs, but I'd rather wait and wait until I can comfortably handle it and then unwrap it. And plus a little more heat that's trapped in here because it'll take a little longer to cool off than just a regular skein yarn. A little more heat isn't gonna hurt anything. So I guess I'll see you once things are cool because I'll probably unwrap them directly into my wash bath. Finally cool, it's actually the next day, and let's wash the yarn. I don't know why it takes forever for yarn to cool off, but a cup of tea cools so fast. This is so pretty. Oh, I'm gonna wash both blanks together because we've got the same color story, just different proportions. Now, if one of them is gonna bleed, I anticipate it would be the green, but I can't say for sure. I mean, we'll have to see what happens in here. Now, I do want to be careful to not unravel these prematurely. I'm going to add some dish soap in. If you want to make blanks that won't unravel, you can add a safety line, which is taking the last string and drawing it through the live stitches, and it'll prevent them from unraveling. Think about how you would draw a string through the stitches at the end of a hat and pull tight. You would do that, except not pull tight, and that would prevent it from unraveling by accident. But surprisingly, things tend to go pretty well, and thankfully, I am seeing a little unraveling. I'm not seeing any bleeding, so that is wonderful. Hey, I always get nervous with green. Now, technically, our green, it's a little darker than 0.5% depth of shade on the darker areas because I used a half gram of dye and there was resist, so it didn't get everywhere. But this is a color that packs a punch, man. Okay, I am really, really happy. Oh my gosh, I love this. I love that I like use this to create almost like an extension of a colorway. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, I'm gonna go put this through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and well, we'll look at the blanks before we unravel them. I am so unbelievably excited by these two blanks right now because they are such a nice pair with one another. But the other thing that is really, really fun is that you can see how if you were to knit down the length of the pink one and then go and knit the green one, the transition would be like a bit sharper than these other transitions that are going to be a little more variegated and more blended. But it kind of works as an extension and almost fractal-like kind of pattern. I love it. I suppose that what I could have done to make the blending a little more seamless is to add a tiny bit of green down here and a tiny bit of pink down there. But I'm still really, really happy with how it turned out. I haven't specifically tried to glaze with deep magenta before, but it did glaze the yarn here. And so there's no question, in my opinion, that this could be used to glaze things in the future. I don't know if it's the same pigment as Pink Orchid, but I think that they behave a little bit similarly, so it could be. But anyway, I now need to go and unravel these blanks. We always knew that deep magenta strikes yarn faster than emerald green, but because we set up the two original dye baths with the same conditions, we have some more evidence. Look at how speckly the pink is. Those little white or pale pink patches are from the resist in the stitches itself. And yes, we can see this little bit of reverse speckling with the green, but the contrast of the green is way less obvious than the pink. So anyway, that's just a little more evidence that the pink strikes faster than the green, which we know because we watched it happen. When we're transitioning into one of the small resist stripes, you can see that the yarn is variegated, pink and green, sort of alternating. It's going to kind of blend those colors together. But
this one had it sooner, there will be a section that is predominantly green or pink, most likely depending on the blank. In some places the stripes don't go all the way across the blank. You can see that in both of them we still have some of that resist section left to unravel, but we're back on the main color as well. It's imperfectly beautiful. And here is our yarn completely unraveled. You can even see from far away how some of these sections are going to be a little more variegated. Some are smaller, some are bigger, but I love this set of yarn. The only way to make this type of colorway exactly is to use blanks. You could, however, do alternating stripes and sizes by winding connected mini skeins and then dyeing those alternating colors. It's just not going to have the mottled and variegated and blended feel as the random resist and painting on the blanks. And I adore it. Things aren't perfectly identical. There's a lot more white in our mostly pink skein, which I probably pointed out earlier, than there is in the green, but some of that white is showing through in the pink sections, so that brings a little bit of continuity. Dawn, I really hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you love the way this yarn turned out. I don't know what you were expecting, but this is a pink and green marvel, and I am so, so excited with how it turned out. If you want to learn about how you can become a lab partner like Dawn, go and check out the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. And if you have a request that maybe isn't a yarn base that I have available, message me on Etsy in advance so we can talk about yarn options before you purchase the listing. The last thing that I need to do is remove the yarn from the Nitty Knotty, and I want to go soak it for a little bit to relax the crimp and let it dry before I ship it to Dawn. Sometimes at this point I would take the yarn off the Nitty Knotty and twist it and show here, but I'm going to be doing all that tomorrow and I don't want to get anything tangled. So I'm leaving it on here, and if I took pictures, I will insert some in here for you to see. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. And if you want to see me do more with blanks that I make myself, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.